Hi class, this is just a brief video on literary devices and logos, pathos, and ethos, and examples for you in the two speeches that you're analyzing. And I hope this will help you as you're working on your critical analysis and your rough drafts of your essay. So if we start with literary devices, let's talk about a metaphor. You know, a metaphor is when a comparison is drawn between similarities and shared traits, or meaning or identity is ascribed to one subject by way of another. So when in JFK's inaugural address, one of the metaphors he uses is this phrase, "And if a beachhead of cooperation may push back the jungle of suspicion." So the metaphor is cooperation is being compared to a beachhead, okay, the safety, and the jungle is compared to suspicion. And why did he use that? Just remember, if you've been doing your context research, that the Cold War was going on, the world was a very unsettled place, and there was a lot of unrest and uneasy feeling about suspicion and safety, for example. He also talks about the chains of poverty. Okay, so that's another metaphor, that poverty shackles people. So that's an example for you. An allusion is another literary device that it's when the rhetor refers to subject matter such as a place or event or a famous passage from a literary work or the Bible, especially in these two speeches. And that is something I'll point out. Both rhetors use the Bible. And if you've included that in your analysis already, that is absolutely fine to use it, even though I'm saying that, because it's there. And that adds ethos, yes, to have this credibility of the Bible. And you have to remember your context, that Americans were a God-fearing nation, and that meant a lot to them. That gave both of those speeches ethos. But the literary device that they both use is called allusion. So in JFK's speech again, he says, "Let both sides unite to heed in all corners of the earth the command of Isaiah, to undo the heavy burdens and let the oppressed go free." So he's alluding to that passage, giving the people a message that they will understand. Some examples of ethos that President Kennedy uses just in his opening, his introductory remarks, when he says hello or greets Vice President Johnson, "Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chief Justice. We observe today not a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom, symbolizing an end as well as a beginning, signifying renewal as well as change." Calling on all those people that have gone before him, the important people that he needs to recognize in the audience, gives his speech ethos. It adds to his credibility. It gives him the authority to be up on that podium making the speech, and that's what ethos is. He also calls, again, on God. "With a good conscience, our only sure reward, with history the final judge of our deeds, let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking his blessing and his help, but knowing that here on earth God's work must truly be our own." That adds ethos to his words too, because he's implying his work is God's work. Okay? How about logos? Logos in these two speeches are facts that cannot be argued with. Okay? And in President Kennedy's speech, he talks about, about the 7th paragraph, I think, old allies whose cultural and spiritual origins we share. That cannot be denied, that they have this rich history, okay? New states whom we welcome to the ranks of the free. That's another fact that can't be argued with. And sadly, people in the huts and villages of half the globe struggling to break the bonds of mass misery. So he also uses a lot, you'll find plenty of examples of pathos. And another very powerful pathos appeal is fear. And he uses one of those about both sides are overburdened by the cost of modern weapons, both rightly alarmed by the steady spread of deadly atom, yet both racing to alter that uncertain balance of terror that stays the hand of mankind's final war. So that really speaks to the fear of the nation, and they need to come together, and he's asking them to trust him, okay? And then, oh gosh, in I Have a Dream, there are so many, and I hope you've enjoyed trying to find some of these literary devices and the use of the rhetorical appeals. You know, an allusion, again, as we said, talks about a place or event as a passing reference, and it's up to the reader to make the connection. So one of the most famous ones that Martin Luther King Jr. uses is "From every mountainside, let freedom ring." Okay, so people are so familiar with that, and he uses that in his speech as an allusion. He makes an allusion to the Bible as well when the passage he quotes from Isaiah is, "The rough places will be plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together." That is such a powerful allusion to that passage in Isaiah. And it's interesting that both rhetors, speakers, have used the Bible. He also calls upon Abraham Lincoln and makes an allusion to the Emancipation Proclamation by saying, "50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation." And I may have said it in another video, but also the setting can be important. As I said, there's meaning in every choice, and he chose to stand in front of the Lincoln Memorial, and that brings ethos also. And so this allusion is backed up by the ethos in the statue that is behind him. Okay? Anaphora is the repetition, another literary device, the repetition of one or more phrases at the beginning of consecutive clauses or phrases or sentences. And Martin Luther King Jr. is the master of using this literary device. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. So he uses this a lot. And also repetition. And if you've been reading that, you will see that, you know, that he mentions let freedom ring, let freedom ring, let freedom ring at the end of the speech. And repetition is a very powerful literary device because it helps the message stick in the mind of the listener, okay, or the viewer, the audience. There's beautiful, beautiful imagery in Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech. And imagery is just that language that uses our five senses to help us feel and see and understand and be persuaded. Okay, so these are all literary devices are to make rhetoric more persuasive. So one example is a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. So you can just feel that oppression and the heat, the way he describes it, it's sweltering, okay? He also uses metaphors brilliantly, and one of the most famous ones is when he talks about a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. And that's such an important part of his message, okay? America has defaulted on this promissory note. And that's also an example of personification, when he's giving America an identity as somebody who can default on a note, okay? Parallelism is when you use these phrases that are very similar. He talks about battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. So that arranging words and phrases and clauses, placing them side by side and making them similar in form, again, stick in the minds of the listeners. And they make for very powerful messages. So those are just a few examples for you to think about, and that's what you're looking for. And when you be sure that when you are talking about how they used Pathos, Logos, Ethos, give examples. And it's not enough, as I said in my post on Monday, it's not enough just to say they did a good job using those three things, or he used literary devices very well. You need to give examples and explain them and explain why that was important, okay, to be used at that moment and what they meant. And you should pick that up from your research, knowing what these mean, like the tiger in President Kennedy's speech. Who was the tiger? What was the tiger? What's he talking about? If you ride on a tiger, you're going to end up on the inside rather than the outside. So take a look at those things. Think below the surface. It's not just the words, but there's real meaning in them. And that's another reason for you to do the context, not just, as I said, for the reader, but also to make your meaning, your analysis deeper and more meaningful for you. You'll see after you watch this video in this same post, I've posted the guidelines that are on the assignment sheet. Use those as a checklist. If you follow those guidelines, you are not going to have any problem writing and creating and developing a critical analysis that is meaningful and that takes a deep look at both speeches, the rhetoric of both these speeches and how it's persuasive. Okay, so use those as a checklist. That should help you, and that's why I posted it again for you. So please let me know if you have any questions. And again, rough drafts are due Monday. Peer review will be due by Wednesday, and I will post the form and the peer review partners in the next day or two for you, so you can post your rough drafts there by Monday. And then your final versions will be due on Friday night. So hope this helps, and I will talk to you soon.